Here we'll learn an overview of pathologic parasites. To begin, start a table and denote the following key points. Pathologic parasites belong to two major groups: the protozoa, which include the amoebozoa, flagellates, ciliates, and apicomplexa, and the animalia, which include the worms and arthropods. Be aware that whereas many biologists consider the term protozoa to be outdated or problematic, it's still used informally, especially by authors in the medical sciences, so we'll use it here. Next, denote some key determinants of parasite pathogenicity: parasite dose and exposure, the parasite's ability to breach host barriers, such as the skin, parasite attachment and tropism. For example, many parasites are tissue trophic and can only attach or enter specific cell types. Replication and life cycle strategies. For example, does the parasite replicate intracellularly? Does it lyse the host cells? Mechanisms and extent of damage to the host. For example, some parasites cause chemical damage, while others can cause mechanical damage, and the parasite's ability to avoid the host's immune defenses. Then denote some ways in which parasites cause chemical or physical damage to the host. Some parasites produce toxins, including various enzymes and endotoxins. Parasites, especially large ones, can cause mechanical damage as a result of their movement through tissues, pressure, or obstruction of anatomical sites. Parasites can produce immunopathy by triggering autoimmunity or hypersensitivity reactions. Lastly, denote that parasites, like other pathogens, have various ways of evading the host's immune system, including surviving inside the host cells, antigenic variation and molecular mimicry, which deceive the immune system into ignoring the parasite, and by inhibiting the immune response itself. As we learn about specific parasites and their diseases, we'll learn more about how they damage the host and avoid clearance. In the remainder of the tutorial, we'll learn some general characteristics of protozoan and animal parasites. Be aware that these characteristics may not be applicable to non-parasitic protozoans, worms, and arthropods. Let's begin with the protozoan parasites. Indicate that they are single-celled anaerobic protists. Most reproduce asexually, but some can replicate via sexual reproduction as well. They have varied life cycles and stages, some of which are quite complicated. While the details of these life cycles are beyond the scope of this tutorial, indicate that in general, the trophozoite stage is the active feeding and replicating form, thus it's most often responsible for pathology. Many protozoa have a cyst or cyst-like stage in which the organism is in a relatively inactive state and is protected by a hard outer covering. This form can provide protection during unfavorable environmental conditions and aid in transmission. Indicate that protozoans comprise both intra- and extracellular parasites and that some require multiple hosts. For example, Plasmodia, the causative agents of malaria, spend a portion of their life cycles in mosquitoes before infecting human hosts. Lastly, indicate that parasitic protozoans are motile. Next, let's show four types of protozoan parasites which are grouped by trophozoite motility. We'll highlight distinguishing features in blue. Click the links in our notes for additional images and information. First, indicate that we'll represent amoebozoa with entamoeba. Show that they use pseudopods for movement. These temporary cytoplasmic extensions produce crawling motility. Next, indicate that we'll represent the flagellates with Giardia lamblia, which causes gastrointestinal illness. Draw a pear-like shape with two nuclei at one end. Then show that multiple hair-like flagella extend laterally from the midline. These flagella make whip-like motions that produce movement. Next, indicate that we'll represent the ciliates with Velentidium coli. This is the only ciliate known to infest humans. Draw its ovoid shape and indicate the tiny cilia that wave in unison to produce movement. Show that Velentidium coli has two nuclei, one macronucleus and one micronucleus, which are helpful identifiers. Next, indicate that we'll use Plasmodium to represent the apicomplexa. Be aware that some authors refer to this group as the sporozoa. Draw an oblong shape with a slightly pointed end and show the apical complex, which is a collection of organelles unique to the apicomplexa. Write that cytoskeletal components of the apical complex contribute to gliding motility in parasitic apicomplexa. Next, let's turn our attention to parasites from the Animalia kingdom. We'll start with the helminths, which are worms. Write that they are multicellular and most adults are anaerobic. Reproduction may be hermaphroditic or involve separate male and female sexes. Indicate that the nemohelminths comprise the nematodes, also referred to as the roundworms, and the platyhelminths, which are flat, comprise the cestodes and trematodes. Write that helminths use their muscular body walls for motility and that they can grow to be quite large within their human hosts, which can lead to mechanical damage and obstruction. Let's show some examples of helminth parasites. First, write that the nematodes are roundworms. To remember this, know that nemo means thread. Show that Trichinella spiralis, our representative species, is round and coiled. Indicate that its outer layer is called the cuticle and that it has a definitive mouth and anus. Next, let's show the flatworms. First, indicate that will represent the cestodes, also referred to as the tapeworms, with Echinococcus. Show that the cestodes comprise segments covered in a tough tegument. This species has two suckers on one end. Write that cestodes are hermaphroditic. Next, let's draw trematodes, which are also called the flukes. We'll show two important but very morphologically different examples. First, show that Paragonimus, the lung flukes, are leaf-shaped. Indicate the sucker at one end and label the tegument. Write that the lung flukes are hermaphroditic. Then indicate that Schistosoma has separate male and female sexes that live as a unit. It's helpful to know that Schistosoma means split body. First draw the male, which has a snow pea-like shape. Then show the smaller, slenderer female, resides within the male's gynecophoral canal. Finally, let's address the arthropods. First, write that we'll focus on the true or inherent parasites that reside long-term on their human hosts. Write that they have segmented bodies with hard exoskeletons. Indicate that medically important examples include mites, which are members of the subphylum Chelicerata, formerly the arachnids, and lice, which are members of Insecta. For our mite example, draw Sarcoides scabies, the causative agent of scabies. Show that the adult form has a hard shell with 4 pairs of legs. Long, bristle-like setae project posteriorly. For example, show the body Laus pediculus humanus, which has 3 pairs of legs. Show that their legs terminate in claws that help them to grip the skin and hair. Finally, write that many other arthropods, such as ticks, mosquitoes, and fleas, play important roles in disease as vectors and intermediate hosts for other bacterial, viral, and parasitic pathogens. This concludes our diagram.